Captain Jake Morrison was having what he thought would be another boring day, checking systems on the research station New Frontier. The coffee was cold, the computers were humming their usual tune, and space looked as empty as ever. Then everything changed in an instant, when that emergency signal came screaming through the void, like a fire alarm in the middle of the night. Jake nearly spilled his coffee all over the control panel. The signal was coming from something he had never seen before. A ship, but not like any human ship. This thing was sleek and smooth, almost like it was carved from a single piece of metal. But it was tumbling slowly through space, completely dead. No lights, no power, nothing. "Commander Lisa Park, you need to see this right now," Jake called out, his voice tight with excitement and worry. Lisa came running from the other section of the station, her boots clanging on the metal floor. When she saw the readings, her eyes went wide. "Is that what I think it is?" "First contact," Jake whispered. "And they're in serious trouble." The alien ship was drifting helplessly near the Kepler 442 system. And from what their sensors could tell, there were life forms aboard. Weak life forms. Dying life forms. Jake didn't hesitate for even a second. "Fire up the rescue shuttle. We're going in, Jake. We don't know anything about these beings. They could be dangerous," Lisa warned, but she was already moving toward the equipment lockers. "They could also be someone's family," Jake shot back. "If we were dying out there, I'd want someone to take the risk." The rescue mission was like something out of a movie. Jake and his team suited up and flew their small shuttle over to the alien vessel. The ship was beautiful up close, all curves and strange symbols, but it was also clearly damaged. Scorch marks covered one side, and they could see where an explosion had torn through the hull. Getting inside was tricky. The airlocks didn't match, so they had to cut their way in. When they finally broke through, they found them. 3 alien beings, and they were unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, and their skin looked like living crystal. It caught the light from Jake's helmet and threw rainbows around the damaged ship. But these beautiful beings were hurt bad, really bad. "Get them to the medical bay now," Jake ordered, as his team carefully lifted the aliens. They were surprisingly light, and their crystal skin was warm to the touch. Back on the station, Dr. Mike Rodriguez took one look at the aliens and rolled up his sleeves. Mike was the kind of doctor who could probably operate on a rock if he had, He had served in 3 different wars and seen injuries that would make most people sick, but even he was stumped by alien biology. "I have no idea what I'm doing," Mike muttered as he worked, "but I'm not letting anyone die on my watch." Meanwhile, Communications Officer Anna Walsh was trying to figure out the aliens' technology. She was a genius with languages and had cracked codes that stumped entire government agencies. But this alien translator device was something else entirely. It kept sparking and making weird noises, and the messages it produced made no sense. "Emergency? Deathworld species. Immediate evacuation required. ... Anna read from her screen, frowning. "That doesn't sound good," Lisa said, looking over Anna's shoulder. What none of the humans knew was that these broken messages were being broadcast across the entire galaxy. Every alien civilization was receiving these fragments, and they were all reaching the same terrifying conclusion. The peaceful Zalani research team had encountered the legendary Deathworlders and were begging for rescue. But the truth was completely different. The Zalani weren't afraid of the humans at all. In fact, they were amazed by them. These strange beings from a dangerous world had risked their own lives to save complete strangers. The Zalani had been trying to send messages of gratitude, telling their people about the incredible kindness they had. Witness the translator device had been damaged in the explosion, turning words like grateful into emergency and amazing helpers into Deathworld species. Every attempt to say thank you came out as evacuation required. As Dr. Rodriguez worked to save their lives, the Zalani could only watch helplessly, as their broken messages painted their rescuers as monsters. They knew that somewhere out there, the Galactic Union was probably already preparing for war against the very people who had shown them such unexpected mercy. The irony was painful. Humans, who had just proven themselves to be heroes, were about to be branded as the galaxy's greatest threat. Admiral Dex was enjoying his morning meal when the emergency alert shattered the peaceful silence of his command ship. The old warrior had seen countless battles across 3 decades of service, but nothing had ever made his hands shake like the message now glowing on his personal screen. The words hit him like a physical blow. Deathworlders, the most feared term in the entire galaxy. Every military academy taught courses about them, though most instructors admitted they were mostly theoretical. Worlds so brutal and unforgiving that their inhabitants evolved into something beyond normal comprehension. Living weapons that knew nothing but violence and conquest. Vex had always hoped he would never encounter such beings in his lifetime. The stories were the stuff of nightmares. Creatures that could survive in environments that would kill most species instantly. Beings who treated warfare not as a last resort, but as an art form. The kind of enemy that could turn peaceful civilizations into ash and dust without losing a single night of sleep. "Get me the War Council immediately," Vex barked to his aide. A young officer who looked just as terrified as the Admiral felt. Priority Alpha emergency protocols. Now, within minutes, holographic images of military leaders from across the galaxy flickered to life around Dex's command table. Generals, admirals, and war chiefs from 15 different species, all wearing the same expression of grim determination, mixed with barely concealed fear. "You've all seen the transmission," Vex began without ceremony. "The Zelani research vessel has encountered Deathworlders. Based on the emergency signals, they've been taken hostage." General Crix of the Hegemony Forces slammed his fist on his own table, the sound echoing across the holographic connection. "This is what we've been preparing for. The moment every military strategist has warned about. How long before they spread beyond their system?" asked Admiral Yex from the Confederation Navy, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. "We cannot allow that to happen," Vex declared, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Assemble the Grand Fleet. I want every available warship, every battle cruiser, every fighter squadron. Strip the home fleets if you have to. This threat ends today." What followed was the most massive military mobilization in galactic history. Across hundreds of worlds, alarms blared in military bases. Crews ran to their ships with the desperate urgency of beings fighting for their very survival. Supply vessels loaded ammunition and fuel at breakneck speed. Engineering teams worked around the clock to prepare weapons, systems that had never been tested in actual combat. The rally point was a dead system 3 light-years from Earth, chosen because it was far enough away to prevent detection, but close enough for a swift strike. Ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace in brilliant flashes of light. Massive dreadnoughts bristling with enough firepower to crack planets. Swift cruisers designed for hit-and-run tactics. Carrier vessels loaded with thousands of fighter craft. By the end of 6 hours, 847 warships hung in formation in the cold vacuum of space. Crews from 15 different species, speaking dozens of languages, all united by a single purpose, stopping the Deathworld threat before it could consume the galaxy. Meanwhile, light years away on Earth, President Tom Bradley was having what he considered one of the best days of his presidency. He stood in the Oval Office, surrounded by his most trusted advisors, discussing humanity's first contact with alien life. "This is incredible," Bradley said, unable to keep the excitement out of his voice. 3 alien beings, rescued by our people. They're actually recovering well, according to the medical reports. Secretary of Defense Carol Mitchell was reading updates from the research station on her tablet. Dr. Rodriguez says they should make a full recovery. The aliens seem genuinely grateful for our help. Their ship repairs are nearly complete too. This could change everything, said Chief of Staff David Park, practically glowing with enthusiasm. Peaceful contact with an advanced civilization. Think of what we could learn from them. National Security Advisor Rita Kim nodded eagerly. The scientific implications alone are staggering, and they seem friendly. This couldn't have gone better if we had planned it. President Bradley walked to the window and looked up at the clear blue sky, imagining the vast universe beyond. Somewhere out there were other civilizations, other forms of life, and humanity had just taken its first step toward joining that cosmic community. Make sure our people at the research station have everything they need, Bradley instructed. Full medical support, the best translation equipment we can provide. I want these aliens to know that Earth welcomes them. None of them had any idea that at that very moment, the largest war fleet in galactic history was preparing to turn their beautiful blue world into a field of ash and debris. The greatest military minds in the galaxy were convinced that humanity represented an existential threat that had to be eliminated immediately. The cruel irony was perfect. While Earth celebrated its first act of interstellar kindness, the galaxy prepared for what it believed would be a war for survival itself. The edge of the solar system had been peaceful for billions of years. Nothing but cold space, distant stars, and the occasional chunk of ice drifting through the void. Then, in a single terrifying moment, that peace was shattered forever. Space itself seemed to tear open as 847 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace in a display that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so absolutely terrifying. Ships the size of cities appeared in flashes of blue light, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. The largest vessels were so massive they had their own gravity fields, pulling space debris into lazy orbits around their hulls. Admiral Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display with cold satisfaction. He had expected to find a primitive world, maybe some crude rockets and basic satellites. Easy prey for the grand fleet. What he saw instead made his blood freeze in his veins. The third planet from the star was covered in lights, millions of them, spreading across the continents like a glowing web. This wasn't a primitive world at all. These Deathworlders had built a civilization that spanned their entire planet. Admiral, his tactical officer called out, voice tight with alarm. We're detecting a vessel approaching from the inner system. It's broadcasting on multiple frequencies. On the main screen, a small human ship appeared. It looked pathetic compared to the massive alien fleet, like a minnow swimming toward a school of sharks. But Dex knew better than to underestimate death based on size alone. Captain Jake Morrison's voice crackled across the communication channels, and the words that came out made every alien officer on every ship lean forward in shock and confusion. This is the Earth ship, New Frontier. We have rescued Zilani survivors and request immediate medical assistance for our alien guests. They're injured, but stable. We're transmitting their medical data now and would appreciate any guidance you can provide for their care. For a moment, complete silence filled the alien fleet. Jake's transmission was so unexpected, so completely opposite of what they had prepared for, that nobody knew how to respond. Then Nex's tactical officer, a nervous young alien named Vex, made the mistake. That would change everything. Admiral, it's obviously a trick. The Deathworlders are using our people as shields. They're probably torturing the Zilani to force them to send those distress signals. Vex nodded grimly. Of course, Deathworlders were known for their cunning, as much as their brutality. They had probably captured the research vessel and were now using the survivors as living shields, while they prepared some kind of devastating counterattack. All ships, prepare to fire, Dex ordered. Target that vessel. We end this before they can spread beyond their system. The first energy beam that lanced out from the fleet was meant as a warning shot, but it came so close to Jake's ship that it actually burned through their outer hull plating. Jake felt the New Frontier shudder around him as proximity alarms screamed throughout the small vessel. What the hell was that? Commander Lisa Park shouted from the engineering section. Jake stared at his screens in disbelief. The massive alien fleet wasn't here to provide medical assistance. They were here to fight. All stations, evasive maneuvers. Anna, get on the emergency channel to Earth right now. The New Frontier was fast for a research vessel, but it was still just a tiny ship trying to outrun hundreds of warships designed specifically for combat. Jake pushed the engines beyond their safety limits, feeling the deck plates vibrate under his feet as the ship strained to escape. Communications. Officer Anna Walsh had never transmitted an emergency signal in her life, but her fingers flew across the controls with desperate precision. Mayday, Mayday. This is New Frontier. We are under attack by unknown alien forces at the edge of the solar system. Massive fleet, hundreds of ships. They opened fire without warning. On Earth, General Paul Stevens was having coffee in his office at NORAD when every alarm in the facility started screaming at once. He rushed to the command center and stared at the tactical display in horror. Hundreds of contacts at the edge of the solar system, and they were all moving toward Earth. How long until they reach us? Stevens asked, his voice deadly calm. At current speed, approximately 18 hours, his aide reported. Stevens picked up the red phone that connected directly to the president. Mr. President, we have a situation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at war. Back on the New Frontier, Dr. Mike Rodriguez was still working frantically to keep his alien patients alive when the ship shook again from another near miss. Medical equipment crashed to the floor, and one of the Zilani aliens, the one who had been trying to repair their translator, suddenly grabbed Rodriguez's arm with surprising strength. Stop, misunderstanding, The alien managed in broken, heavily accented English. Its crystal-like features were twisted with desperation and pain. Rodriguez stared into alien eyes that were clearly trying to communicate something urgent. What? Misunderstanding. What are you trying to tell me? But before the alien could answer, another weapons blast rocked the ship, and the moment was lost. Outside, the largest military force in galactic history was bearing down on Earth, convinced they were about to fight monsters. And on Earth, humanity was preparing to meet what they thought was an unprovoked alien invasion. The stage was set for the most tragic misunderstanding in the history of two galaxies. Two species that should have been friends were about to tear each other apart, all because a broken translator had turned words of gratitude into cries for help. Neither side knew that they were about to discover just how dangerous it could be when good people were forced to fight. What happened in the next 8 hours would become the stuff of legend. Military historians would study it for centuries, trying to understand how a species could transform itself so completely, so quickly, when faced with extinction. At 1432 Eastern Standard Time, Earth was a peaceful world of researchers, farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers going about their daily lives. By 2230 that same day, every human on the planet had become part of the most improvised and desperate military force ever assembled. The transformation began in the most unlikely places. In the parking lot of a shopping mall in Ohio, truck driver Betty Williams was loading groceries into her 18-wheeler when the emergency broadcast came through her radio. Alien invasion. All civilian vessels with space capability to report immediately to the nearest military installation. Betty looked at her truck, then at the emergency modification kit that military engineers were handing out. You want me to strap missiles too? My grocery hauler, she asked. Ma'am, that grocery hauler has engines designed for interplanetary cargo runs, the young engineer replied. Right now, it's the closest thing we have to a warship. Within 3 hours, Betty's truck was floating in orbit, its cargo bay packed with enough firepower to level a city block. She wasn't alone. Thousands of civilian vessels were being converted at breakneck speed. Pizza delivery ships mounting LASER cannons. Luxury space yachts carrying torpedo tubes where their wine cellars used to be. Even the garbage collection fleet was armed with mining charges, repurposed as ship-killer bombs. Admiral Susan Hayes stood in the hastily converted command center, watching her impossible fleet assemble on the tactical display. She had spent 30 years in the Space Navy, commanding proper warships with trained crews and tested weapons. Now she was looking at the most bizarre fighting force ever created. "Admiral, the SS Paradise cruise is reporting ready for combat," her aide announced, barely managing to keep a straight face. Hayes keyed her communicator to address all ships. "I know this isn't what any of us signed up for. You're cargo pilots, tour guides, and research scientists. But right now, you're also the only thing standing between Earth and total annihilation." She paused, looking out at the stars, where enemy ships were growing closer by the hour. "Remember, we're not just fighting for our planet. We're fighting for the idea that when someone needs help, you help them. No questions asked, no matter who they are or where they come from. That's what makes us human." The response came back from hundreds of ships, voices representing every nation, every language, every walk of life on Earth. "Yes, ma'am, we're ready." Meanwhile, on the ground, Colonel Danny Wright was performing his own miracle of improvisation. Construction crews that had been building space elevators were now mounting military-grade laser arrays on orbital platforms. Mining operations were converting asteroid-cracking charges into planet defense systems. "Sir, the construction workers are asking if we really want them to turn the Luna City Foundation project into a weapons platform," his aide reported. Danny looked at the tactical display, showing hundreds of alien ships approaching. "Tell them, yes. If those aliens want Earth, they'll have to go through every human alive, and that includes the construction crews." What the aliens couldn't understand, what no species in the galaxy had ever witnessed, was humanity's unique ability to turn anything into a weapon when threatened. Tools became guns. Construction equipment became artillery. Even scientific instruments were being modified for combat. Dr. Amy Chen, a quantum physicist at MIT, was working with a team to convert their particle accelerator into what she cheerfully called a really big gun. When her colleague asked if she was sure it would work, she shrugged. "Worst case scenario, we blow up half the eastern seaboard. Best case, we take out their flagship." But the most critical battle was happening in the medical bay of the New Frontier, where Dr. Mike Rodriguez was still protecting his alien patients as the ship dodged enemy fire. The injured Zolani, who had introduced himself as Healer Keth, was working frantically with a collection of spare parts and sheer determination. "Almost almost," Keth muttered in broken English, his crystalline fingers moving with surgical precision over the damaged translator device. Rodriguez watched nervously as explosions lit up the space around them. "Keth, whatever you're doing, you better do it fast. I don't think we have much time left." Keth looked up with eyes that reflected Rodriguez's face like mirrors. "Must stop war. Humans save us. We tell people humans good. Machine broken, they think humans bad." The terrible irony finally hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. The aliens weren't here because humans had done something wrong. They were here because humans had done something right, and a broken machine had twisted that kindness into a declaration of war. "Can you fix it?" Rodriguez asked. Keth's hands moved faster, sparks flying from the device. "Try. Must try. Both. Peoples die if not fix." Outside, two species that should have been friends were preparing to destroy each other in the greatest misunderstanding in galactic history. The only hope for peace lay in the hands of an injured alien and a human doctor, working together in a damaged ship while the universe burned around them. Time was running out, and both worlds hung in the balance of a single broken translator, and the desperate hope that truth could travel faster than weapons. The Battle of Luna began at exactly 7:42 Universal Time, when the first alien dreadnought opened fire on what appeared to be a small human patrol craft. What Admiral Vex didn't know was that the patrol craft was actually a converted garbage. hauler piloted by a maintenance worker named Tony Ritchie, who had volunteered because his ship had the fastest engines in the civilian fleet. Tony's voice crackled across the communication channels as energy beams lit up the space around his tiny vessel. "Well, this is new. Hey, Admiral Hayes, these guys definitely aren't here for a friendly chat." The battle that followed broke every rule of space combat ever written. Human ships didn't move in neat formations like proper military vessels. They swarmed like angry bees, completely unpredictable and absolutely relentless. Cargo haulers loaded with mining explosives rammed into alien cruisers. Luxury yachts that used to carry rich tourists now carried enough missiles to sink battleships. Admiral Vex watched his tactical display in growing horror. His ships were designed to fight other military fleets, vessels that followed logical patterns and predictable strategies. But humans fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to protect. "Sir, the enemy vessels are using some kind of unconventional attack pattern," his tactical officer reported, voice tight with confusion. "Unconventional how?" Vex demanded. They're improvising, sir. Every ship is doing something different. A cargo vessel just dropped a load of construction equipment on the ISS Dominator's hull and detonated it. A civilian transport is using mining lasers to cut through our armor plating. Captain Jake Morrison was leading one of the most insane military operations in human history. His research ship, the New Frontier, had been hastily fitted with equipment meant for drilling through asteroids. Now he was using those same tools to carve through the hull of an alien dreadnought. "Follow me in, people," Jake broadcast to the squadron of converted luxury yachts flying behind him. "These drills can cut through anything the universe throws at us. If they can handle solid rock, they can handle alien metal." The yacht pilots, most of whom had never seen combat in their lives, responded with the kind of determination that would have made professional soldiers proud. "Copy that, Captain, for Earth." What the aliens couldn't understand was that every human ship carried people who had chosen to be there. These weren't conscripted soldiers fighting because they had to. These were volunteers who had looked at certain death and decided that some things were worth dying for. Betty Williams, the truck driver who was now commanding a makeshift warship, found herself facing off against an alien cruiser 10 times the size of her converted 18-wheeler. The logical thing to do would have been to retreat. Instead, she pushed her engines to maximum power and charged straight at the enemy ship. "This is for every kid who's ever helped a stranger," she shouted into her communicator as her improvised weapons tore into the alien vessel's armor. The battle raged across the space near Luna, human determination clashing against alien technology. Every time it looked like the humans were about to be overwhelmed, they would pull off another impossible maneuver. Another desperate gambit that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. Admiral Susan Hayes was preparing humanity's last desperate option when Healer Keth finally managed to repair the translator. The device flickered to life just as Hayes was about to detonate a converted fusion power plant that would have taken half the fleet with it. "Stop," Keth's voice suddenly burst across every communication channel in both fleets. "Humans saved us. Humans are friends. We called for help to thank them." The words hit both fleets like a physical shockwave. Every gun fell silent. Every ship stopped moving. The silence that followed was so complete that you could have heard a pin drop across the vacuum of space. Admiral Vex stared at his communication display, reading the translated message over and over again. The words were simple, but their meaning was earth-shattering. The humans hadn't attacked the Zilani, they had rescued them. The distress signals had been messages of gratitude, twisted by a malfunctioning translator into calls for help. "Cease fire," Vex whispered, his voice barely audible. Then, louder, "All ships, cease fire immediately." The revelation spread through both fleets like wildfire. Human ships that had been preparing to ram alien vessels suddenly backed off. Alien gunners who had been targeting human craft lifted their fingers from the firing controls. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication channels, and for the first time since the battle began, it carried hope instead of desperation. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth's New Frontier. Healer Keth, is that really you? Are you saying this whole thing was a misunderstanding?" Keth's response came through clearly now, the translator finally working properly. "Yes, Captain. We have been trying to tell our people about your kindness. The machine was broken. It made our words of thanks sound like cries for rescue. The implications hit everyone at once. Two species that should have been friends had nearly destroyed each other because of a mechanical failure. The greatest military engagement in galactic history had been fought over a translation error." Admiral Hayes spoke for all of humanity when she said, "Well, that's the dumbest reason for a war I've ever heard." The laughter that followed, coming from both human and alien ships, marked the end of the shortest and most unnecessary war in galactic history, but it also marked the beginning of something far more important, a friendship between species that would reshape the galaxy. The peace treaty that followed included a clause that would become known throughout the universe as the Human Kindness Protocol. Never again would an act of mercy be mistaken for an act of war. Never again would the galaxy risk threatening the things that humans chose to protect, because the universe had learned something that day that would echo through history. There was nothing more dangerous than accidentally making an enemy of people who were willing to die for strangers.